Hey guys, welcome to the CGM podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kurt Falis, otherwise known as Chip, and joining me,
The one and only Chip.
one and only,
I like it.
is Dr. Pastor, Senior Pastor here at Green Acres, Michael Gossett. How are you, Mike?
I'm great. I am actually really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a couple weeks here. We've just done some one-off topic podcasts. Again, if you haven't checked out some of our recent ones, 2 weeks ago we covered the 10-10-10 vision that we have here at Green Acres,
Right.
That Michael shared a few weeks ago on Sunday morning with our church, and just encourage you, go back and check that one out if you haven't yet. But today, I'm super excited to jump in. We have a new series that we are launching, and the title of that series, Michael, is Why Religion Doesn't Work.
Wow.
And you're like, oh, so that's kind of
It sounds depressing,
It does.
but it's not.
No.
It's super encouraging. It's actually uplifting because so many times in life, I mean, how many people have you heard, Kurt, that just says that church doesn't work for them?
Mm-hmm.
They walk away from the church. Statistically, we're all aware of the mass exodus from, their senior year of high school. And then it seems like once you settle down, you get married, you have a family, then you start kind of coming back to church a little bit. But we see this, that over and over again, there's this exodus of people leaving the church. But we also see just the fact that people are kind of walking through the motions of what is known as religion.
Yeah.
But what we're going to find out is that's not what we teach here at Green Acres. That's not what is taught here on this podcast, even that we're not religious people, right? But we are people who pursue Jesus in a relationship.
Yeah. Well, and in 2019, Pew Research put out an article, basically the findings of a study they did. Is about a 12-year study where they looked at religious affiliation,
Right.
where people identifying as Christian or as Protestant, as Catholic, other religions out there, or
Right.
where what is classified as unaffiliated, and that would count as people who claim to be agnostic, atheist, just do not want any religious affiliation whatsoever. And the interesting thing they found is that religious affiliation was going down and the unaffiliated groups were going up over this time period. And so you're talking about a jump from around 16% to over 26% of Americans now saying, hey, I have no religious affiliation.
Right.
And
Right.
so as we put that in context for our discussion today in this series, why religion doesn't work, I think
Which, by the way, before you go to that, that jump of 26%, or that difference, for the first time in American history, that it's over 50% now of people claiming to not be affiliated with Christendom in any way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyways, keep going.
There's this shift happening in America. And so when we put it into context of this series we want to jump into here on the podcast, Why Religion Doesn't Work, I think what we're finding is if you look at Christianity as religion in its context in the same way as all these other religions that are out there, it doesn't fit. It doesn't, and people are like kind of turned off by it.
Right.
And they're saying, hey, this isn't for me. And so, and today I want to hopefully land in our discussion is that this is a foundation issue for people, that they properly kind of can navigate through what is religion, what is what you've already said, relationship.
Right.
And that's kind of the discussion I want to land today.
Well, and let's just be honest, this is not a new issue.
Yeah.
Okay. So statistically, we are seeing shifts in our culture, but this is not a new problem because let's be reminded that there has never been a time in life that religion has worked. Okay. So there has never been a moment in history where religion was the answer to anything. When you think back even through the covenants of the Old Testament, it wasn't this act of religion that was drawing people to the Lord, but rather it was the relational aspect. Even if you think about the Noahic covenant, if you think about the Davidic covenant, if you think about the Abrahamic covenant, and all of these things where you see there's a tendency for us to believe in a requirement-based faith, but it's not. Okay, see, that's what religion says. Religion says that there is a requirement of us in order to have this religious type of understanding. There is not a requirement. The requirement is not there, but rather it is the relationship that is through the act of God's grace. And that's what we see all throughout the Old Testament. But it's not different in the New Testament either, because Jesus spent the majority of his ministry debunking the religion of the day. In every sense of every sect, we see Jesus debunking what the Pharisees were saying, what the Sadducees were saying, even what the Zealots were saying, or the Essenes, what they were saying. And Jesus was taking those concepts and all of their difference of opinions and saying, no, listen, religion is not the answer, nor is it the way. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, not Christianity, not Catholicism, not the Baptist faith and message. See, Jesus never claimed that. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so we always have to come back to that understanding. But let's go back to the foundational issue. You remember, because that's what you're getting at. Because so that was from 2019 backwards 12 years, okay? And so when you think about, okay, well, now we're in 2021, but what we see from 2020 is some highlighted issues as well. Because what we see from 2020 is when everything went online, okay, the church doors were kind of closed to corporate worship to a degree. Everything went online, right, during the pandemic of 2020. What we have seen is that people still are not back. Okay, what we have seen is that people are not, they have not come back to the corporate gathering with God's people. Now, and before we kind of set on this pace or a tone of indictment, that's not what we're discussing. Because there are multiple reasons why people are not back. Because there are still instances where people need to be cautious. COVID is still making its way around at a rapid pace. We
just came out of East Texas having some of our highest numbers
absolutely.
just 2 months ago than we had over the previous year and a half. And so absolutely, there's still reason for concern for some individuals, for certain pockets.
But what we have seen nationally, okay, this is a national deal right now, is that the majority of people have simply just not come back to church. But they're out at the grocery store, they're out at the ball games, they're everywhere else. They just haven't made church a priority once again. And what I am contending to think is that this is just a highlight or an emphasis of a problem that has always been there. And now we're getting to see it really come to light. And what it means is that maybe foundationally that what those individuals, if they are still not back in the church, that foundationally what they could be experiencing is an understanding of religious values, but not an understanding of relational values. And so maybe they have been experiencing religion, but they haven't experienced Christ in the way that he's truly called us to experience him.
Well, in preparation for our podcast today, I stumbled upon an article from Lifeway, and this is pre-COVID, and they were talking about 10 reasons people are leaving the church. Okay. And some of what you've already talked about, right? You said, hey, COVID kind of just amplified things. It kind of sped some of this up, what already existed. So let's look at some of these points and see if they, are the same application here. They got out of the habit.
Oh, man.
The number one. So if we were seeing people who would get out of the habit, whether that's because, they go through a season maybe where they're traveling a bunch or, they had, sick kids or whatever, and they just are like, I haven't been to church in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal to go back.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've seen that again.
Which is so common. And it happens to all of us. My morning routine, I can easily get out of habit just by missing one morning. Okay. And so it takes 10 days to build a habit, 30 days to build a habit, 50 days for a habit to be ingrained maybe. And there's a bunch of research surrounding that I will misquote. But it takes one day to break a habit. And so it happens to all of us. But how true is it that because we allow things in our life to take really first place or priority in our lives, And that is the issue. Not that we stay out of church for one day or break our habit of one day. The issue is the realization of actual priority in our lives. All right, let's keep going through them.
So, and like again, you said this, but the habit part, that there should be in our walk with Jesus, like signs of that relationship. And being involved in church is a sign of the relationship you have with Jesus.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, continuing on. The second thing they mentioned, they left after they graduated from high school, right? We see this, and this is not, again, a new trend at all.
Right.
But the struggle from...
but it's a continued trend. I mean, so you say it's not new. And so you and I, even since we were in high school and before, this has always been a topic of discussion. But guess what? It's still not fixed.
Yeah.
There's still a disconnect between a 12th grader and a freshman walking into their college campus. You know, it's not new, but we still haven't done anything about it.
Exactly. Number 3, they decided they didn't like the institutional church. And if anything, I think 2020 amplified some of these things.
Without question.
You know, we look at some of the things culturally that were happening here in the U.S. From some the conversations about racism, the conversation that actually precluded COVID over the last couple of years about sexual abuse scandals that have happened within the church's walls and the church's as a whole response to that. People have become sour about the institution of the church, and so that's caused them to leave.
But that's you're hitting on this because that's where our culture is at large, and the church is responding in similar ways as the culture is. Because the church is not an institution. The church is an organism. And so what we need to understand is because sometimes we misinterpret those things, but see, the world views the church as an institution. But those who understand their relationship with Jesus and really a biblical ecclesiology of what church really is, then we understand it as a living organism rather than a dead institution that's not alive and well. You know, so.
That's good. The fourth thing they point out, this Lifeway article, that people have left because they were hurt at the church, whether that's by other people in the congregation. You know, you see roots of gossip or hurt feelings, harshness. Fifth one, they say they couldn't find a church to meet their needs. Why people leave? I mean, that goes back to, hey, is it the church about something for you, or are you participating in the work of the church, the gathering of believers, or is it more of a show or a just an entertainment piece for you in your schedule?
Well, in both of those, in 4 and 5, number 4, they were hurt at church, and number 5, the church didn't meet their needs, and so they're gone. Those are both of those are very legitimate concerns, but they do not validate your decision to not partake in corporate worship. Because so many times we use moments in our life to validate or justify our unwillingness to participate in corporate worship. And so we have to separate those two things, because guess what? The church is full of broken people. And the church is full of people who are in need of God's grace continuously. And so there are going to be moments of rub and difficulty. But what does James tell us? To persevere in these things, because this is what grows us in the likeness of Jesus Christ, that we press into those things. We don't run away from those things.
Well, and wouldn't it be perfect, right, if the church could be the representation of what it's going to be in heaven? Without sin, without hurt, without any of that.
Right.
But because, like you said, it's made up of broken individuals. Sin still has an occurrence within the walls of the church. It happens. I'm not trying to discount anyone who has faced, backlash or other people's wrong choices that have hurt them and led them to have a sour taste in their mouth about the church. But there also has to be an understanding, like, hey, I'm not perfect either. My sin exists. Your sin exists. And you just got to understand, like, hey, this side of heaven, there's continually going to be sin and problems. The sixth thing that Lifeway points out in this article, they had a need and felt the church didn't meet it. This is one I think that goes right in hand with number 5. They couldn't find a church to meet their needs. The sixth one, I think it touches more on, they may have had a death in the family or a crisis, and the church really did fall. The people that should have been the ones to support them really didn't, and they were
Right.
hurt by that. And
Yeah.
those are real things. And
Man,
again,
and-
a broken church made of broken individuals.
And once again, it's valid. That's a valid concern. The calling is that when we experience those things, that maybe God would use that in a way that you would take on that ministry of, to think, okay, I'm going to reach out and make sure that people know they're loved and, in those moments of crisis.
For sure.
And we talked about this in the last episode of how to respond to crisis and what the crisis management should look like in a biblical way.
Yeah.
And so maybe that person God is using that to draw them into that ministry.
Real quickly, just to get through these, we got number 7. That
Are you telling me to stop talking about each
not
one?
what I'm saying. By
I
any
feel like you
means.
are.
We just have a lot of meat on this podcast. I want to make sure we cover it all. The 7th one, they never felt connected to the church, meaning they may have been an attender, maybe in worship. They maybe sat in the back of what we call connect groups, a Sunday school class, a life group, and never really drew meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
Which is what we see in Acts, that there should exist in a gathering of believers is meaningful relationships.
Absolutely.
Number 8, they did not give to the church.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and to a certain extent, right, where you put your money, where you show value in that. And,
Correct.
If that's not part of what you do,
Right.
it's easy to give it up. Number 9, they left when their pastor left. And what this article kind of touches on here is their connection to the local body was based on an individual, whether it be the pastor, another staff member,
Right.
maybe a friend that got them to church. And when that person isn't there anymore, not even for a wrong reason, right?
Right,
Someone
right.
retires, someone moves away, this or that. They weren't there at the church, again, for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And the 10th one that they say is that they moved, they had a life change happen, and then they chose not to jump into a new church body.
Yeah.
And sadly, I feel like I've seen that maybe the most. And I can connect it back to the point they made in this article about people who graduate high school and they go to college and they never get involved.
that move is tough.
Right, you had a reason you were connected to church, whether that's friends or you maybe as a teenager, it was your parents, and this is what you grew up doing. And you go to a new setting, you're like, how do I find a new church?
Right.
And you never really do. And
Yeah.
you just kind of make excuses, and all of a sudden your Sundays are filled with NFL football or the T-ball fields or this or that, or
Absolutely.
getting brunch and not connecting with the body of Christ.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on that just because I think it gives a good framework. When we start this series, why religion doesn't work. I mean, there's got to be a foundation to understand, why do people go away, and where can we learn from that as individuals?
Well, to be, completely transparent, religion doesn't work in keeping people because there's no connectivity in religion. When we talk about connecting people to Christ and to the church, their religion won't ever fill that gap. There's always going to be a gap between humanity and God, okay, that religion can never fill. And so if there's this expectation to be plugged into the church, there has to be that connectivity. Well, if religion doesn't meet the need, we have to identify, well, what does? And we know that is the gospel of Jesus Christ, that is what transforms people, not through the basis of religion, not through the basis of works, not through the basis of us trying hard or any actions on our end or identifying requirements and then abiding to them, but rather it is us abiding to Christ and through his salvation that he has provided for us through his grace, and that we have faith in that. And that is what provides the connectivity, but not just to Jesus, but that is the connective tissue per se with the rest of the body of believers. And here is what we have seen is that the religious don't desire community. But those with a relationship with Jesus have a natural desire to be with God's people because they have the Spirit of God in them. And there's this natural yearning for corporate worship. During the pandemic, when the churches were closed and only offering online gatherings, there was a deep yearning among a lot of people to get back, not to the building. The building doesn't matter. It's the people that matter. It's the other believers that we want to be with.
Do you remember how sweet it was? And this is purely a Green Acres context. But do you remember that outdoor worship gathering we had how sweet
Yeah.
was that day? And if you know me at all, if you know Chip, you know that I don't love outside. It's
Yeah,
just
you don't like to sweat.
I don't like to sweat. I'm fair skinned. Mosquitoes are drawn to me in an unnatural way, and I'm always getting bit. So being outside is tough. But if you remember that day, and it was kind of warmer, it was summer,
Yeah,
right? It was
yeah.
May. And there was something sweet and powerful
Right.
about God's people. It wasn't the building.
No.
It was
We were outside in the parking
yeah,
lot.
in lawn chairs and on blankets,
Yeah.
and we had a PA system working that you could kind of hear, kind of not. But there's something about the people of God coming together in
Yes.
worship, and it was just a powerful day. And what you're highlighting, like the COVID, we missed this.
Right.
That was such a stark contrast of going from we've had weeks of hey, we're watching online and we're not seeing people, we're not singing together, to having that, and that's just powerful.
So I'm always reminded of kind of this illustration, and this can kind of close us out. But I really want to get this in our mind because, we talk about church a lot here and being connected with God's people. But religion functions in a cruise ship. That's how religion functions. When we talk about those reasons to lead, well, it didn't meet my needs. I had a need and it wasn't met. I didn't feel like this was a good fit here or whatever. That's cruise ship mentality. When we think, man, I wish they wouldn't sing this music. I wish they didn't do this. That's cruise ship mentality. Well, Green Acres is not a cruise ship. Green Acres, because we are a Bible-believing church and we have an ecclesiology that tells us that we are a battleship church. We're not a cruise ship. We're an aircraft carrier who's ready for battle. And this is what an aircraft carrier does. You think about these fighter jets coming in and going out, coming in and going out, because they are coming back from war. That is the life around us, that is the world around us. They're coming back to this aircraft carrier to get refueled, to stock up, and to get back out onto the mission field. And you see, that's the way that we want to exist here.
Yeah.
Not to come here and for us to soak and be entertained, but for us to come here, get refueled, and get sent right back out on the mission field. That's what Green Acres is called to do.
That's good. That's good. And when we have that as our foundation, that changes everything about the perspective of why we come, and it shifts from a religion to a relationship. Michael, I've loved this conversation, and what I love about it, this is just the beginning, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have more episodes on this topic, why religion doesn't work.
Yeah.
This is just kind of our launching point, and I'm super excited to go deeper with it.
Yeah, I am too. I look forward to it in the next couple of days, and we do want to invite you that if you have not yet subscribed, do that now. Hit the bell, or how else do you do it?
Well, you go YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those links are provided.
Don't you like how I jumped in to do that part and I don't even know how to do it? Isn't that great? Chip saves the day
Man, the leader
once
with the
again.
handoff.
All right,
It's
yes.
like the quarterback.
Yeah.
So good. Hey, but really, and if you're not connected with our church, hit us up on Instagram at GABC Tyler. And we're super excited. We'll hope to see you soon.
Have a great day.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's episode and joining in on our conversation. If you liked what you heard or you want to know more about Green Acres, go check out our website at gabc.org or follow us on Instagram at gabc_Tyler. Have a great day.